What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook Wednesday afternoon. We've now heard from Mike McCarthy and his two new coordinators, one on each side of the ball, obviously, Joe Philbin and Mike Pettine. Philbin returning after leaving 5 years ago to take that head coaching job down in Miami, and he's been in Indianapolis with the Colts for the last 2 years. Now back in Green Bay as Mike McCarthy's offensive coordinator, saying it's his job to make Mike McCarthy look like the smartest play caller in the NFL. And his counterpart, Mike Pettine, taking control of the Packers defense. A lot of interesting things from Pettine. Obviously, I think the number one thing Packers fans have been wondering and kind of asking me about, at least, are what his plans might be scheme-wise. And he didn't waste any time noting that the 4-3-3-4 designation for base defenses is really a thing of the past, citing that 80% of the time, and this is stuff we've heard from Mike McCarthy throughout the years, most of the time these defenses are in sub packages, and he is not going to be trying to put square pegs in round holes. He thinks a big part of it will be dependent upon what their roster ends up looking like on the defensive side. So I think we'll see things take shape over the course of this offseason for Pettine and the defense. But the first impression, I was talking to a couple people who were in the room, a couple of other people that I know throughout the league who watched, and the guy won the press conference. There's no doubt about that. Now, that's a very, very tiny baby step, but the first impression is a positive one. There's no doubt about that. So I thought I'd jump on here and talk to you fine folks, see what's on your mind. A lot of coaching hires done by the Packers. They announced their new full staff. Mike McCarthy did meet with the media this morning and kind of laid out his vision for 2018, and it sure sounds like things are going to go back. He stressed it time and time again. Things will be back to basics in Green Bay, so much so that they are completely starting over on offense and rebuilding their playbook. That's not something they do year in and year out. Traditionally, Mike McCarthy has gone into the offseason and tweaked things, but it sure sounds like there is going to be a complete reimagining / rebuilding of the offensive playbook in Green Bay. Very interested to see what that turns out like, because anybody who's followed the Packers for a long time knows that over the last 3 or 4 years, the book had kind of been out on the Packers on how to play them, what to expect from them on offense, and now there's a possibility that things could be a bit different. I wouldn't expect wholesale changes. I don't think they're going to go to a wishbone attack or anything like that, but it will be interesting to see what kind of tweaks McCarthy and company have heading into next season. Daniel starts us off with, it's time to rebuild offense to a degree. It was getting very predictable. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously it was all predicated upon Aaron Rodgers, and you saw how things really fell apart when Aaron Rodgers wasn't in there. But that's the price of giving your quarterback, your superstar quarterback, more and more control at the line of scrimmage. When things have to be run without him, then things get a little dicey, as we saw throughout the season. I really enjoyed hearing Pettine talk about how he's a defensive coordinator and not worried about a future head coaching job. It sure sounds like his experience in Cleveland was a tough one. He went so far as to say he was beaten up both physically and mentally. The quote that really caught my eye was, it took me some time to smell smells and see colors again after his Cleveland fiasco of experience there. Obviously, he took a year off and then spent last season in Seattle. Said, he learned a lot of stuff there in Seattle on both sides of the ball, was working for the offensive and defensive coaches. But yeah, I found that very honest of him to go, there. I mean, most guys would kind of politic if they were asked that question, but he was very honest and said no interest in being a head coach again. He thinks he is a defensive coordinator, and he looks forward to kind of rebuilding things in Green Bay, both for himself and Green Bay's defense. Rodgers gets hurt quite often, so free agency for an experienced backup? Well, I don't know about quite often. He missed time in 2013. That was 5 years ago, Possibly. I mean, as far as getting an experienced quarterback, I think it makes a lot of sense. You saw this year how things really fell apart when they asked a guy who'd never made an NFL start to shoulder the load, a quarterback-centric offense that really didn't seem to fit the bill. So, yeah, do I think they'll look for veteran help? Yes, I do. The problem is, we've talked about it here a couple times, I tend to think kind of the upper echelon, so to speak, of veteran quarterbacks who might be available will probably want to go someplace with a little more tenuous starter, if not wanting to find a place where they may be able to even compete for a starting job. You come to Green Bay, you know you're not starting ever, unless Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. So, yeah, I tend to think that that'll be the tricky part if Gutekunst does decide to go that way. Let's see. What's your take on the Pack targets in free agency? Edwin, it's hard to say until we get a look at, and this will happen in a few weeks, but when teams start tagging guys, the franchise tag and transition tag window opens in a few weeks. And when that starts happening, we get an idea of who's actually available. Then we'll start kind of delving into that. But for right now, it's really just guesswork, and you're really just throwing darts, because you can look at guys, like I know there's been a lot of talk about Ziggy Ansah and Jimmy Graham, etc. And those are great names, and we all know they're talented, but it'll be very surprising if Seattle and Detroit, etc., and these teams don't try to keep those guys in the building, and the tags are one way they can go about doing it. Draft Rodgers' eventual replacement this year, asks Bob. Well, interestingly enough, this is the age Favre was when they drafted Rodgers, so I guess it's a possibility. I would be surprised if they did it this year. I would think next year probably makes. I would bet on that before I'd bet on 2018 being the draft they do it, but you never know. Rodgers has said multiple times now he wants to play into his early 40s, much like we're watching Brady attempt to do, so it's hard. You take that guy and he sits for 4 years and Aaron Rodgers is still playing at a high level, then yeah, okay, maybe you trade him, but that was the idea with Hundley, and we saw how that went. The Browns will side in Gordon and get him off your radar, y'all. Luke, I agree. That's one of those names I'm talking about, where it's all well and good to think about, you look at those free agency lists right now and they have all this top-heavy, these name recognition at the top of all those lists, but you start actually getting into free agency, and a lot of those guys will be kept by the teams that they're on. When do you see a contract extension for Rodgers? I've been saying I think it happens this summer. I'd be very surprised if the Packers allowed this offseason to pass without getting something done. Obviously, he still has 2 years left on his deal, so there's no major rush. But the closer they get to the end of his deal, the more leverage Rodgers has, and they're going to have to try to get something hammered out this offseason. And I think it sounds like Rodgers is amiable to that. Every time it's been brought up, he knows what the situation is, and he knows where he is as far as the pecking order when it comes to salaries for starting quarterbacks, and he knows he's fallen way, way, way down the totem pole, and the Packers obviously have to address that. Do you think we'll go more run-oriented offense with Rodgers getting up there a bit? I could see maybe a possible leaning towards the run game. I think Joe Philbin may have something to do, say in that regard. As long as Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, though, I don't see, and Mike McCarthy is Mike McCarthy, I think, it's going to be a pass-first system, regardless of what kind of retooling or readjusting they do. They in their blood and veins and the way they live their lives, they are men who throw the football first, and the running game comes second. Now, might that change? Yes. I mean, McCarthy has shown throughout his coaching career that he is not afraid of buttoning it up and playing some smash mouth football and running the football. He's done that throughout the years in Green Bay. He's had to lean on it, whether it was with Favre or Rodgers. He definitely did it in San Francisco, and he absolutely leaned on the running game there in New Orleans. So yeah, I don't think that's something he would shy away from. But I do think with Aaron Rodgers at the height of his powers and as many receiving weapons as they have, I think the pass will always be first in Green Bay. Love Pettine's comments on being more confusing to the quarterback in pre-snap. Yeah, and you mentioned the Cam Newton soundbite where, Clay Matthews called out the wheel route, and Cam Newton already knew the counter punch to it and said, watch this, and they proceeded to burn the Packers defense. I do think a big part of it, and that couples with something else that Pettine said that I thought clearly showed he knows the issues this defense had. When asked about what the ideal Mike Pettine defense would look like, his first answer was, we'll be prepared. And anybody who watched the Packers in 2017 knows that's something they were not week in and week out on the defensive side of the ball, whether that was going into the game or going in down in and down out. Confusion should be on the offensive side of the ball if you're playing defense, not on your own sideline. I like the Pettine guy. Great hire. Mike, yeah, he's I said it when the news broke. I thought it was a good hire. I didn't see anything today to sway my opinion. Well, we'll see how things work throughout the offseason and into next year. Which player could break out with a new D system? Bob, I'll look at Josh Jones. If he's asked to do a lot more towards the line of scrimmage like we saw earlier in the year last year, and not asked to do as much in space as kind of a free safety mode that he was, I guess required to play late in the year due to injuries, I think he could be a big-time breakout player. What's the story with the running backs next season? Alex, I think you'll see probably a timeshare with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, with Ty Montgomery featured as a third down back throughout the season. I do think you'll see a mixing and matching dependent on how they feel it's best to attack their opponent week by week. But I will say, I know lots of people clamor for more Aaron Jones, and it makes sense. He's an exciting runner. He's a really talented guy, both running between the tackles, running outside, catching balls out of the backfield. He does all of that very, very well. But until he becomes at least as adept as Jamal Williams is in pass protection, you're going to see this staff lean and favor Jamal Williams over Jones, just because you can't put guys out there and not have Aaron Rodgers protected. He's your franchise, and we've seen how it all falls apart when he's not out there. Are there any more Amon Green types out there? I would say watch Jamal Williams from the second half of last year. That guy ran as hard as Green ever did. Now, he might not be quite as adept out of the backfield as a receiver as Green was, but he certainly doesn't seem to have the fumbling issues that Green did, and he definitely runs as hard. Montgomery too inconsistent for third downs. Daniel, I disagree there. I think because of the fact that you can use him in so many different ways, and because his presence out there really helps force defenses to kind of declare, and you can dictate what the matchups are because of him. Rodgers moves him, into the backfield, out of the backfield, into the slot, out on the perimeter. You can do all sorts of different things with him, and it really helps the quarterback determine what defenses are playing. I think he's invaluable in that role. Now, I don't think he's going to be limited to just that. I do think he will be used in a variety of different ways, including at wide receiver on early downs. But, I think as a third down back, he makes a lot of sense. Mays, John, I tell you what, Devontae Mays, clearly not the rookie year he was hoping for, but he's still a bruising running back and a talented guy. I really liked him last summer. Clearly had the issues with the fumbles, his first 2 touches against Baltimore, and then really kind of got shelved after that. But, the offseason's here. He's got a clean slate. Go away, refocus, and come back in the new season. Who knows? We'll see what kind of, what kind of game he can put together in the summer and camp into the preseason. But, for right now, it's obvious that Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones are the 1-2 going forward. Let's see. Will the Packers ever let McCarthy go? I think it says event let McCarthy go, but I think you meant to say ever. Yeah, I think if, he has a down year this year, there's a good chance he's let go at the end of the year. With only 1 year left on his deal at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if, Mark Murphy made that call. Now, one thing McCarthy did say today, he's spoken to Mark Murphy more in the last 3 weeks than he has the last 12 years in Green Bay. That tells you how serious Mark Murphy was about being in touch with everybody in football, including his head coach. I said he was going to talk to, he was going to be meeting with Mike McCarthy each and every week. So there's a bit more of a connection there. And yeah, I got to think the only reason McCarthy's still even in the building is because of Mark Murphy. Mark Murphy really believes in him as a coach and really believes that he's the coach for this team. So, yeah, I think McCarthy, if the team wins and has its regular postseason run in 2018, I think he'll probably get an extension and he'll be around for a while. But we'll see. There's a long way to go in that regard. Do you think we should have taken T.J. Watt? Ooh, good question, Alex. I think it's too early to say. I think he obviously had a very good rookie campaign. Kevin King looked promising, though obviously missed the end of the season there with the injury. And you cannot look at that decision without throwing in Vince Beagle, who obviously had a redshirt year, his rookie year, missed the entire offseason and for better part of the first season, his first rookie season, before he finally got on the field late in the year. But you've got to let that play out. There's every possibility that those two both come back next year and absolutely light it up, take a big jump from year one to year two, and then all of a sudden it's looking like the Packers got the better end of the deal. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a very distinct possibility. So, like I said, early returns, yeah, the Packers probably maybe kicking themselves a little bit, but you got to let it play out. You got to see how things develop between the three of them. How high is Blake Martinez's ceiling? Higher with Pettine? That's a good question. He's got a lot to improve upon still, but he obviously took a big jump from year one to year two, one that I certainly wasn't expecting him to. It'll be interesting to see as far as what kind of shape the roster takes and how that affects his playing time. One of the reasons he was able to compile so many tackles, he was co-leader in the NFL as far as number of tackles on the season, is he had a lot of chances to. He was on the field for nearly every down. Most packages kept him out there. Not everyone, but most of them did. Now comes Pettine, and he wants to disguise. He wants to be multiple. Will that limit his opportunities? I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see if he can improve in some of the areas where he really needs help, which, obviously his pass coverage in man-to-man has been an issue through his first 2 years. I thought he improved in his zone drops. He got his hands on a couple of passes that he should have brought in for interceptions, things of that nature, but you can't deny the production, and you can't deny the big jump he took from year one to year two. Hopefully Pettine can kind of tease a little bit more out of him. I still say the Packers would do well with a real nose tackle, make the inside linebackers better, and the rest of the defensive tackles. Wayne, I caught hell yesterday for saying they should look at Vita Vea there in the first round, but I agree. I don't think you can have enough talented big men. I think year after year we see the best defenses in the league are defenses that can throw waves of bodies at you up front, talented bodies, not just guys. And Vea would go a long way in helping do exactly what you're talking about right there. I think Kenny Clark is a hell of a player, but giving him a running mate that isn't Mike Daniels, who would probably be best served not having to play nose tackle, I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense. So, yeah, do I think they're going to go that way? Probably not, but I think they absolutely have to look at it. Do you think Patricia will be successful in Detroit? That's a good question, Peter. I know I have a GM that he's familiar with there. They work together in New England. It's hard to dismiss the struggles that former Belichick lieutenants have had other places, whether it's personnel guys or coaches. The list is short of guys who have gone on from working with Bill Belichick and getting their jobs elsewhere who have had even modest success. Most guys flame out wherever they end up going. Now, Patricia as a coach, I think, is excellent. I think he's proven that throughout the years. He definitely, obviously knows the defensive side of the ball. But you never really know about guys until they're in the thick of it, so to speak, as a head coach. My early kind of impression would be, yeah, I think he's going to be a very good head coach. But it's really hard to say until we see him operate as the head guy. Callahan going to have a breakout year? Whew, I don't know, man. Callahan might not even be on the roster next year if they look to bring in either a draft pick or some kind of free agent to compete with Hundley. Oh, Bruce, typing as Yoda says, annoying you are. There's this button. I'm trying to think. Oh, the off button. Or the clicking of the X. There, it'll take me right off your screen. And then I'm not annoying anymore. Well, who's more annoying? The one who clicks on something to hear a guy talk so he can type in you're annoying? Or the guy who, is doing his job? I don't know. Can we bring Anthony Dilwig back? Yeah, I'm sure I hear they're looking into it. Kirk Cousins? Well, he's not coming to Green Bay because he's going to get paid big-time money. He's going to start somewhere. Now, where that's going to be? Maybe Cleveland? I don't know. But the Redskins have been kicking that can down the street for a long time. And now they're either going to have to pay him big money or let him go and let someone else do it. Could you see the Vikings having a Falcons-esque downturn without Shermer? Meg? Absolutely. No question. Don't forget, Norv Turner basically quit because he couldn't handle Mike Zimmer and all the drama behind the scenes there in Minnesota. And the offense wasn't exactly clicking with Norv to begin with. In steps Pat Shurmur, who obviously had experience with Bradford, but then does a great job with Case Keenum. Got him the NFC Championship, obviously. And now being New York, who takes over at offensive coordinator? Those are delicate things. And we saw, like as you suggest, Matt Ryan and that offense in Atlanta certainly wasn't the high-octane attack that we saw when they went to the Super Bowl last year. Every reason to believe and to reserve judgment until we see who gets made offensive coordinator in Minnesota and who their quarterback is. So, yeah, a lot to play out there. And is it possible they could take a step back on off? Absolutely, it is. I never talked to Bakhtiari on why he wears 69. I believe it's well-covered territory. I just have to use your Google machine, and I'm sure you'll find a story on it. I have never personally spoken to him about it, but I have read about why he likes the number 69. Do you believe Gutekunst makes a splash at tight end? I don't know, define splash. I mean, it really depends on who's available. I know my colleague Pete Doherty kind of laid out the case for going after Jimmy Graham. I guess that's a possibility, and that would definitely count as a splash. But Cameron Brate would make sense, and I don't know if you'd call that a splash, but that would be someone they could look at. There's a lot of possibilities there. I don't think he necessarily needs to make a splash, so to speak, but he definitely needs to address the position. It definitely needs an overhaul. Could we get Brate? Yeah, I think it's a possibility. We'll see. Again, a lot to play out. When do the comp picks come out, Kyle? We usually get the announcement, I believe, the week of the combine, which will be the last week of February, heading into the first week of March. I think I fly to Indianapolis on the 27th, so look for that week for the comp picks to come out. Your opinion on D'Angelo Yancey? I really liked him, and I was very surprised he didn't make the final 53 coming out of camp. He's almost like a James Jones type, big, muscular guy, runs really well after the catch. Really started making plays the second half of camp and into the preseason. But he's got to earn it. He's got to come back now this offseason, put the work in, and see what he can do there when the offense starts kind of retooling and refiring, coming out of offseason workouts into camp. He's got a long way to go, but I really liked what we saw early on there, and I know he's been on the practice squad all year. He could definitely do what Geronimo Allison does in this offense. There's no doubt in my mind. He just needs an opportunity. What were you most impressed with in regards to the new coaches' interviews today? I gotta say, I really liked what Pettine laid out as far as where he's been, how he wants to go about implementing his defense in Green Bay. The line I really liked was when he said you can't win with players you don't have, meaning it's all well and good to talk about scheme, but if your guys that you have on hand can't operate or can't execute those X's and O's, then it's really no good having those X's and O's. And that coming off, you can see why Mike McCarthy was drawn to Pettine and that kind of philosophy and that kind of idea, because of the fact that they've just finished with Capers, who did a lot of trying to make guys do things they weren't very good at. So, especially these last 2 years. And some of that was due to injury, but some of that was just, Capers running his stuff and not adjusting. So that, to me, that was probably the most impressive aspect. I mean, Philbin was exactly what I expected he would be. He talked up the opportunity in McCarthy and his history and wanting to come back, and he's joking with reporters. It's very much the guy that he was when he was here last 5 years ago. And McCarthy was a little more open than I thought he'd be. And I thought it was very interesting, his comments on the offense and the fact that they want to kind of retool and redesign the entire offense from the ground up. That's a little eye-opening. So we'll see what that actually means throughout this offseason and heading into next year. But those are the things that really jumped out at me. Is it Super Bowl or bust this year? Well, they'll tell you in Green Bay it's always Super Bowl or bust. I do think McCarthy has to have a strong run to stick around. I think, an 8-8 type season, 7-9 type season probably gets him fired. Will they run the ball? It's a big question, Ryan. I've talked about it a little bit before. I don't think they're ever going to be a run-first team with McCarthy and Rodgers in the building, but I think they will work on the running game a lot more, yes. Any news on Dupree? I think he's in Buffalo, if I remember right. Re-signed 42. Damian, that is one of their big decisions. Would be his third contract. Obviously plays at a position that they're going to need to be strong at in Pettine's defense. Obviously brings a veteran presence, knows everything there is to know about the game. His body seems to be breaking down a little bit. Can you count on him week in and week out? These are all things they're going to have to take into consideration when they're, deciding whether to give him big money or not. And let me, if this was Ted Thompson still as GM, I would say there's probably no way they bring him back just because of Ted's track record of not giving guys third deals. But with Gutekunst now calling the shots, we don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he thinks the veteran kind of leadership that Burnett would provide would be invaluable. So we'll see. Kyle, good question. News on Darren Perry. Nothing yet. McCarthy did say, I thought this was weird actually, that they would have his situation resolved by the end of the week. But he also said they had a meeting as a staff this morning, and they were on a call with the coaching staff, the analytics group, and Darren Perry was a part of that meeting. So it sure sounds like he's, and I know he's under contract, but it sure sounds like he's listening to other offers. I know he was in consideration in Nashville for Mike Vrabel's staff, but he's also still participating in the coaching meetings in Green Bay. So I guess, it'll depend on whether he gets that job in Nashville. And I know Vrabel's first choice actually ended up getting hired in New York by the Giants last night. So maybe Perry ends up down there in Tennessee. All right, someone just put in trade Rodgers to Jaguars for Bortles and TJ Yeldon. So that means it's time for me to pack up. Thanks, everyone. Sorry if I didn't get to your question. They do fly by rather fast, but make sure you go back and watch the replay because I may have answered your question. And make sure you hit PackersNews.com for all the latest. We'll have everything on all the new coaching hires. In fact, Tom Silverstein has already got a nice piece up about it. Ryan Wood will have more from all the coaches that they were made available today. And then Michael Cohen's got everything going on down there in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. Gearing up for the draft. It's right around the corner. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day.